Hello, this is Ed Keay-Smith from the Business Marketing Show. Welcome to this episode. We are very fortunate on this episode of the show to have Mark Hann from Tactica Partners to talk about taxation for your business and also how to accelerate your business with the correct strategies. So Mark is someone that I bumped into at a networking event. He's actually you're the president, correct, Mark, of the Western Suburbs Business Association. And that's where I met Mark, and I'm a member of the Western Suburbs Business Association in Perth. And we got talking from there, and I thought I'd have him on the show to discuss what his company does. So thanks for coming on. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me along. I'm looking forward to the session.
And of course, as usual, we have Brendan. Sometimes I forget Brendan. He's not that forgettable, but sometimes I get very focused on having the guest on the show. So, but Brendan's here to make us all look good. I mean, is it the other way around? Sorry. So
come on, Ed. Jazz together.
That being said, so Mark, we'll do a bit of a backstory on you to fill people in with what it is that led you up to the point now, and how you got started with Tactica Partners. So, going back, we won't go back to when you were born. That's probably going back too far. We'll go back to when you left high school. So, what did you study at uni when you finished high school?
So when I left high school, my first choice was to become a veterinary vet. Didn't work hard enough and didn't get the marks to do that. So I followed my other passion, which was sport. Did a Bachelor of Phys Ed and a Diploma of Education at the University of WA, the following 4 years.
Okay. So that's quite a different thing, a vet to doing that. So, and then, so how did that then lead into doing what you're doing now? Because that's another jump. So you've got going from one thing to another to another. So
well, Phys Ed was my major, maths was my minor area. So I taught Phys Ed and maths at a local high school here in Perth for 4 years.
Okay.
Realised even before I went into teaching that teaching wasn't going to be my career choice. At the end of 4 years, I basically decided I wasn't going to be teaching, wasn't 100% sure what I did. I ended up initially taking up an IT course in computer studies, but quickly realised that wasn't for me and then changed into accounting. So I followed accounting, ended up working part-time with the accounting firm that looked after my taxation affairs. They were good enough to take me on as a mature age student. And as was the way in our generation, we typically stayed with the one employer. I stayed with that company and became a partner in that company after a number of years, right up until the time that we then split that company into three and Tactica Partners came out of that.
Okay, so when did that happen? When did the Tactica Partners come about?
So Tactica Partners was born on the 1st of July 2007.
Okay, all right. So this is your 11th year going. Very, very cool. Now, look, the subject of taxation usually probably sends people into a tailspin, no doubt. Anything to do with accounting and tax is something that people love to hate. Now, the thing is, if regardless of whether you like doing anything to do with your business taxes and accounting, it's a critical part of any business. And look, our show is called the Business Marketing Show, and this is not really a subject of marketing, but I think it's a critical point that people forget. Once you've done all the marketing and the sales and you get your business growing, you've got to take care of the back end side of it with your accounting, with your bookkeeping, with your taxes. And if you can screw those things up, then you can have a world of hurt. So it's all very well and good talking about making the money, but how do you deal with the money when you get it? So no doubt you've seen a lot of interesting things in your business career, dealing with businesses and tax. What is the first thing you would say that people should do as a small business when they're starting to grow regarding their accounting and their taxes? What's the first step they should take?
Well, look, it's a big question. Look, I think it almost reflects your culture and your brand and your marketing in the sense of the way you go about your business. So if you want to deliver on the front end a quality service to your clients, if you look within the business, then you also want to see a business that is robust in its considerations of things like accounting, perhaps management accounts, and certainly making sure that you're lodging your accounts and tax returns on time. So I think it's really important for business owners in startup phase and all the way through is to make sure that they get their back office in order. So there's no, you start off with a sense of control. It's important that you control the business and not the business control you.
Yeah, very good point. Because if you don't have all those ducks in a row, then that's where things can come undone very quickly. And you're talking about having things paid on time in terms of your taxes and your BAS payments, etc. And our bookkeeper that we've been using for quite a few years has told me some horror stories about companies and how much back log they have of paying for their BAS, etc. Sometimes in the millions of dollars, and they haven't been paying them. Do you come across that sort of stuff yourself?
Look, absolutely. In fact, far too often, particularly in small business, and small business, I'm sort of talking, people or businesses turning over, a couple $100,000 up to maybe a couple of mil.
Yep.
We see probably far too often, I think you used the word bookkeepers there in what you were talking about. They're a part of your business. Good bookkeepers become the pathway between the business owner and accountant often in terms of generating valuable reports, timely BAS preparation, payroll, super, all of that sort of stuff at the coalface. And then we as an accountants can sort of sit over the top of that process. And as we go as accountants, as we get a closer relationship to the internal bookkeeper or even the contract bookkeeper for our clients, we get much more confidence and credibility around the quality of the information that's been presented to us as accountants. It's amazing the number of times that we see people who call themselves bookkeepers that unfortunately don't live up to the label.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few business associates that have had some absolute horror stories with their bookkeepers, and they've got things so far out of whack that they've ended up owing $400,000 in tax that they hadn't anticipated because the bookkeepers hadn't done things correctly, all sorts of things. And you wonder how that can happen. But, like anything, there's always people who are supposedly, in quotation marks, accredited at what they do. Is that sort of thing getting improved upon? Are there more regulations coming down to help that stop from happening?
Look, I think with the ongoing development of software, Zero Mile in particular, and some of the other packages around, you're getting Zero accredited, MyOb accredited bookkeepers. Bookkeepers now, become registered BAS agents. And so there is a level of education and requirement often for bookkeepers to attain. And I would therefore be saying to business to make sure that that the qualifications around your bookkeepers, are real and validated. Unfortunately, we see and we hear about it in other worlds, politics in particular, where people maybe inflate or overstate their qualifications. So you do need to do your due diligence in that regard. In Tactica, we actually have an expert bookkeeper, which we originally brought on as our internal bookkeeper, which we now use, or her key role is actually to almost create some due diligence and liaison between, our role and the bookkeeping role inside a business. So Tony Brunsgaard, delivers a terrific medium between those two roles, and then can also bring to light for us any issues that we see as bread and butter bookkeeping issues, which can then be relayed back to the client.
Yeah, very cool. One of the very first bits of business advice I got, which I didn't listen to, sticking my hand up, guilty as charged, that I didn't listen to until later on, was one of the first things you should do when you start growing is get a good bookkeeper to help you manage your accounts. And Lois, who you've met Lois, Mark. So we would often do the books ourselves, and it was usually a night that involved wine and chocolate and shouting. And it's like, what's this? And like all sorts of frustrations. It would do our head in because we're not bookkeepers. I've got a much better understanding of it now, but I still don't profess to be an expert. And you can't be an expert at everything. So I think for people who are watching who have been thinking, well, the first step before you go down the path of doing a lot more growth is get a bookkeeper and get a very good partner, such as Tactica Partners as an example, to help you with your accounting, because it's all well and good going and getting your tax done by, no offense to H&R Block or someone that does the quick jobs that does it. But if you want a strategic way of moving forward, you need to have someone in your corner. Would you agree with that?
Look, without a doubt, and like all things in business, relationships are important. Tactica Partners are certainly not the cheapest accounting business going around. We don't try and compete on price. We try and compete on, service. You hear that a lot, I suppose. But they're important. They're important. It's an important engagement. You need to be thinking about it as an investment in your future. A good accountant and a good bookkeeper might cost you a bit more on an annual basis or upfront, but it's an investment, and so it's an investment in the business, in the relationship, and then I think it's an investment in going back to your space, in the brand and the marketability of what you're doing. Getting credible people in and around your business elevates, in my mind, the position that you're trying to achieve and actually then reflect out into the marketplace. So all of those things, I think, are, really a key around the culture and the way that you want to go about doing your business. And you pay for what you get.
Yeah, too true. Look, if you go cheap, you can end up with the horror story. So go with someone who's credible. So what have your experiences been on this side of things, Brendan?
Well, when we started our very first business, I was 19 or something. We had no idea what we were doing, just no idea. And we were one of those stories where we were years behind on past statements and things like that. And yet, it hurt, like not having good. I mean, you can talk about the tax is one component of it, and it hurts, right? No one likes paying tax, and it's painful to do it. And I had to pay a lot of tax this week, actually, so it's a bit of a nerve. But yeah, I mean, I guess the other part, which you haven't mentioned, is having good like a good set of financials to manage the business by, to make sure you're making money, make sure you're profitable, and then also that you actually have cash in the bank, and the cash flow side of things is working okay. So, we ran into a lot of trouble. That was a bigger business. We had 20, 25 staff. It was doing several $1 million a year, and there's money flying around everywhere. And we had I was early 20s at the time, and had a very poor understanding of, business financials. It's, to a degree, it was pure luck that the business grew so quickly. But we had, we were way out of whack with our numbers were out of whack. Our cash position was poor because we were importing stock, and there was just money everywhere, and we just didn't have a clear set of financials to see what was actually going on in the business. And particularly when a business gets bigger, these things become more important. It's, if you're doing a few $100,000 a year of revenue, it's easy. You open up your internet banking, and there's money in the bank. Yay, it's a good day. But when you get over that 1 million mark, and you have a team to pay, and then you have inventory as part of that, you can very quickly get into a position where you might be profitable, but there's no money in the bank. So I've had a very coloured experience with financials and books over the years. So I learned a lot of lessons the hard way.
Yeah, and they could have been curtailed if you had the right advice. But that's the thing. People have this mentality that they're saving money, or that they don't want to spend the money in the first place by not getting a good bookkeeper and accounting team to help you, but in the long run, it pays for itself, and it's something that you end up coming to the realization that you have to do. So again, if you're listening to this and you're in that position, don't muck around anymore. Get someone to help you. And just a bit of a caveat, and just to say that, seek professional advice. Seek someone like Mark. This podcast is just giving you some ideas and paths to follow. We're not giving professional advice. So the only one on the show that's actually can give professional advice in this subject is Mark, but you would need to go and see him for that. So that being said, one thing I do remember, Mark, is Brendan was very early on using Xero. I was a MyOb user at the time, and I resisted. Now, there's always this argument of bookkeeping and accounting tools. Now, you guys are a Xero accredited company, but I'm assuming you use other tools as well. Other than that, you're MyOb and Xero as well.
Look, MyOb, historically we've been a MyOb firm. As Xero's come into the marketplace, it's certainly challenged MyOb's position as the market leader in software accounting solutions. We're probably, we can support both. Probably new clients that come on, we lean in a little bit more towards Xero. Their add-ons and some of their reporting analytics is a very easy to utilise. It's a sort of an intuitive package.
Yeah.
Look, there are other ones out there. QuickBooks, which has sort of fallen away a fair bit. Reckon, which has sort of been in the news lately. And then some of for larger businesses who have large inventory arrangements, or builders and developers have their own bespoke, sort of secondary packages that manage things like work in progress. And those sorts of things. So again, for the majority of small business doing, mainstream kind of business, either of those two packages, MyOb and Xero, are worth considering.
Cool. Yep. Look, I vouch for Xero. I think, Brendan, you've been using Xero for about, 7 years or something?
Yeah, the whole time we've had this business, so maybe 10 years.
Oh, 10 years, okay. All right. I've been about 6 or 7, so... And
we've got a lot of things plugged into Xero, so because it's cloud-based, and we have a couple of different arms of the business. So we have third-party systems taking orders on the internet and dealing with payments and things like that. So.
Yeah, it's super easy. So, so look, that side being spoke about, let's move on to talking about the business acceleration side of what you guys have as a service. Working with businesses with their strategy of what they're doing. Can you give us a bit of a broad stroke on how that works for us, please, Mark?
Yeah, sure. Look, the bread and butter of what we do is tax and compliance, and presenting tax-based accounts to facilitate the preparation of accounts. The tax returns. And Brendan, you going back there and making mention, look, no one likes to pay tax. But if you're actually paying tax, you're making money. It's a good problem. If you're paying tax, that's a good problem. As some people seem to take it upon themselves to eliminate tax from their operations, which means they're creating maybe deductions, things to turn a profitable P&L into a loss P&L. Moving then on to the business acceleration stuff, and again, Brendan, you touched on things such as understanding your cash flow, reporting regularly, getting those financials. So you were saying, I think initially, which is not unusual in startup phase, where you kind of were just focused on getting the business up and away, and you weren't worrying about the stuff in the back, but then it came to bite you on your bottom because of late lodgements, penalties.
We were total cowboys. Like, we did compliance. As I've got older, I've realized, like, you can't get away from like this statutory stuff and compliance, and it has to be dealt with. It's like paying your staff. You can't not pay the staff. It's like you have to pay tax somewhere along the line. You can't avoid it. So
correct. I mean, you've got an obligation. It's a key fundamental building block of your business. You've got to get that stuff right. if you don't get that stuff right, somewhere down the track, it could take your whole focus away in terms of actually having to deal with, ATO inquiries or late lodgements and penalties and all that sort of stuff. And you don't want that to interfere with your business. So again, it's a very fundamental key part of start up all the way through. And hopefully, as I say, you create a relationship with an accountant that actually helps doing that. So then going on to the business acceleration, once you kind of get that stuff, that foundation block of the compliance in place, there's some really useful information in there. Often with tax and compliance, it's out the back window. It's 7 months old or 6 months old or 3 months old or possibly even later. And your business has moved on by the time that those financials and tax returns are prepared. So I suppose, Ed, the business acceleration is to try and move our clients' minds into helping them better understand what's going on in their business by using reporting. And it can be as simple as, unfortunately, many of our clients don't spend any time on doing P&L budgets for the next 12 months. Yeah. So they don't know what the year looks like. They don't know how the year's tracking as things go along. They don't reflect budgets to actuals. And then from that, you can then do more detailed three-way cash flow forecasts. And Brendan, I think, again, you touched on it. One of the, cash is king. People want to know, even if the reports say you've made the profit, often they go, well, where is all that money sitting? Where is it? Is it stuck in inventory? Is it stuck in work in progress? Is it somewhere else tied up in things that I'm yet to pay for, BAS or whatever it might be? And once you start then elevating your thinking in trying to understand what the business is looking like out the front window, I suppose it's a very general way to describe accelerating your business from looking out the back window to out the front window. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, business forecasting is always something I found to be a bit of a challenge. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are certain businesses that would be an easier task to do. But portions of our business, it's very easy to predict what's happening because we've got continuity programs happening with clients where we're charging monthly fees. And so we know at the start of every month how much is actually coming in. But then there's things we have really sort of no predictability about because sometimes we get jobs in that are worth tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes we get things that come in that are worth $1,000, and that can vary month to month. So how do you deal with that sort of inconsistency of cash flow and forward planning?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I don't think in my view, you don't need to get overly wrapped up in those variants. The purpose of a budget is to set what you think is your best estimate of what the year looks like. And then, at the very least on a monthly basis, you compare what your actual numbers look like to your budgeted forecast, and then extrapolate that out to see how that affects the year end we typically work on a financial basis. And it can be rolling beyond that time. But it helps you understand that, okay, if it's a big project that comes in and typically looks very profitable, that's great because that's a terrific result, bottom line, typically. The flip side may be that you get a project in that for whatever reason doesn't turn out as profitably as you like and actually negatively impacts your bottom line. And then how is that going to affect going forward what you may plan to do? So there may be a need to consider a large capital expenditure. It gives you the ability to determine whether the business can fund it itself, needs to third-party finance, maybe an injection of capital. It can help you make decisions based on reality, not based on gut feel. Yeah. And then you get into that wonderful situation where suddenly you're getting more control over the business and not the business controlling you, which is, again, reflected by what we've spoken about before. Yeah. Certainly one is a much more pleasant experience. and look, no doubt you guys have seen so many different variations of businesses, and you've seen a lot of similar businesses. So I think that makes sense to me where the strategy side would come in. So roll us through the process. If someone comes to you for the first time as a new client,
what are the first things you start working on with them in their business?
Well, I suppose it's a little of repeating what we've said. We make sure that the fundamentals in place. They've got their compliance up to scratch. Their bookkeeping's working well. Tony goes in and does a bit of a bookkeeping health check to make sure the processes are sitting well in there. And then I suppose engaging with the clients to help, or probably to educate them and question them around what are maybe the three most important things to them. What are their issues? Is cash flow a concern? It's trying to extract from the client where they see their most significant priorities in terms of where they are in their business, and then to see whether we can help them or we can identify, it might be a business consultant that actually can come in and challenge people around their strategic planning. It might be there's cultural issues inside the business that aren't working well, and the team is not on song, and they've not got controls. There's no processes and procedures. So there's a whole bunch of questions that we can raise for clients that help elevate them and educate them to start understanding what are some of the key things that make their business tick. And right now we're in a sort of an age where technology is moving very quickly, but the ability to extract data out of not just the accounting systems, but maybe the CRM systems and starting to track important KPIs. It could be things like, cash flow, debtor days, creditor days. It may be stock turn, the amount of time that inventory sits on shelves, or how long has it been sitting on a shelf for, and why haven't we recognised that we've got stock that's been sitting there for 2 years and it's tying up our cash? What's the decision about selling a particular line of product versus another line of product? What are the gross margins that sit inside if you have a whole bunch of different lines that are being sold into a wholesale environment or retail environment? Each business has a rich mosaic of components that can particularly be teased out, investigated. What questions would they need to ask? Are price rises in this marketplace still achievable? And what does a small price rise of $1 or 50 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents mean to a bottom line? And then you can start doing the what ifs and helping people understanding the impacts of their decisions, which then goes back to the reporting and the forecasting and sorts of things. And you get into that environment, that starts getting pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah, and I think as a new business owner, you don't know what you don't know, and you're coming into this type of scenario, then having someone who's seen it, because like you see all the forward steps where the business person or business owner may not see and probably doesn't see, particularly if they haven't been down the path before. So it can save them a lot of grief. I personally think learning from other people's mistakes is much better than learning from your own. I mean, there's always that, people say, learn from your mistakes. Well, if you can avoid making them in the first place, that makes more sense to me. So what are your thoughts on that, Brendan?
About making mistakes?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of money making mistakes. So it was an expensive learning experience, but it was a quality learning experience.
Yeah, so a tax accountant partnership would have been much more profitable.
Yeah, like I said, we were young and we were cowboys and kind of, it's the government. We don't, we're like, we'll get to it eventually. We were more interested in selling stuff.
And look, let's face it, we all have to pay tax so we can keep these fantastic politicians employed, because they're doing such a good job right now. Sorry, did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to say that out loud. That just came out completely by accident. So look, on a side note, just moving away from the topic of business and tax, well, it's not really away from it, but as we mentioned, the Western Suburbs Business Association. Now, you're the president, aren't you, Mark? Did I get that right?
That's correct, Ed. Yes, I've been.
Yeah, you've been president 4 years?
4 years.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Now, obviously, we'll give the organisation a plug for anyone who's listening to this who's in Perth or in the western suburbs in particular, which would make more sense for them to join. But there's hundreds of organisations out there like Western Suburbs Business Association in Australia and globally. And what's important about joining these types of things, Mark?
Oh, look, first of all, the association's purpose is to, in our case, to support local business, and probably secondary to that is to help businesses create relationships that may lead to business or just a further relationship. So when I talk to new members or people considering joining, networking in particular is not simply rocking up at an event, having a glass of wine, sharing a business card and expecting business is going to flow, because it's not about that. It's about building trust, and trust, as I think both of you gentlemen would appreciate, takes time. So when I'm talking to people about when they're coming to considering networking, is to make sure that they understand that it's a long-term strategy. It's a very least, it's really a 12 to 24 month kind of process that you've got to participate in, and without expectation, almost without expectation of receiving. It's actually more about giving.
Definitely.
So that's sort of the premise and that sometimes comes at a bit of a shock to people. I think some people just think they can come in and do exactly what I said you shouldn't do, and they're disappointed. And we see those people then fall away fairly quickly. Yeah,
they may turn up once or twice as a guest, but they don't ever join the groups and things like that. I call them networking ninjas. They turn up with their business cards and they flick them out like throwing stars, and then expect people to all of a sudden give them business. And someone said to me, who was it that said they went to something the other day? It was someone that was a guest at a networking event. Oh yeah, I won't mention which one it was, but another network that I'm involved with, the guy who's the president of that said that he had a guest who came along, and this woman said to him, called him up the next day or a few days later and said, "Oh, I wasn't very impressed with your event. I've only had one phone call from people who want to do business with me." Really? So that's a perfect example. I'm going, if that's how you think, you're going to be absolutely stuffed. So
yeah, I think, look, again, it's to me, it's marketing is a big wheel full of lots of spokes. The networking is a spoke in the wheel of marketing activity, I suppose. But it's a long-term, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But if you don't commit to it, and you don't commit to it in a way, then I would respectfully suggest that you're probably approaching it in the wrong way.
Yeah. Too true. But it is a common thing that people just really don't understand how to network. And Lois and I does our head in. We see this all the time. But, again, it's an experience thing. It's like accounting. It's like bookkeeping. If you think you know something, but you really have no experience and you go into it with your eyes shut, then that's what's going to happen. And it's going to take those learning experiences to set you straight. So we're coming up to the end of our time, Mark, and thank you again for coming on the show. It was great to have you. Now, because you're based in Perth, the majority of your clients, I'm assuming, are in Perth. Do you deal with clients anywhere else in Australia, or is it purely just Perth?
Look, majority, be fair to say, are in Perth and the outlying suburbs. We do have a reasonably large client in Cairns, operating a hospitality business up there. He's originally from Darwin, so there's some interest in Darwin that we have a little bit to do with. And previously, we've been involved with some businesses out of Broome and Kununurra. So look, today's technology allows you to do business, pretty anywhere, really.
Yeah, like we're doing now with the podcast. You can hop on. It's most of it's digital. I know, Brendan, your bookkeeper is remote, aren't they? That you don't.
In Perth.
Yeah, they're in Perth. You're in Brisbane, so there you go. So that's fantastic. So anything else for Mark, Brendan, before we finish up and let him get back to helping people sort out their business?
How does someone if they want to get in touch with you, Mark? How do they reach out to you? Hit the website or email you? Or
Yeah, Tactica Partners, probably the website is the best way. We've got our Alphas number and email contact there. Be happy to have any discussions. And typically, we know when we're talking to people, the clock isn't on, sort of thing. Like we understand that we need to. If people have questions and want to meet us, you've got to get a feel for someone. We're not going to be perfect for everyone. Hopefully, we're perfect for a lot of people. And we're certainly looking to grow our business, so we will welcome any inquiry. That'd be terrific.
Fantastic. So we will stick the link in the show notes to your website. And thank you again, Mark, for coming on the show. It was great. And I'll see you at the next Western Suburbs Business Association networking event coming up soon. Thanks. And thanks, Brendan, for your time also.
Guys. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me along. Appreciate it. And enjoyed the opportunity.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for listening.